Hey there, everybody. It is I, Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, and this is the Podcast Lawyer Live. Today, we are going to be talking about some interesting questions. First off, I'll be sharing a little bit of my podcast movement diary. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. Well, I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Podcast movement diary, we're going to be talking about what audio drama producers need to know to keep things legal in their podcasts, and we'll be talking also about selecting a title for your show that is similar to a brand or a product or something like that. So we will be back in just another moment, right after this little opener. Well, hi everybody. It is Thursday afternoon. It's 4 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. here in Nashville, Tennessee, where I am at the Podcast Movement Conference, and I hope you are having a wonderful day and a great week. I am certainly having a good time. It's been a little strange because there's been a lot of first of all, it's Tennessee, and protocols here in Tennessee are rather different from what I'm used to seeing in California. So I am wearing this quite a lot just to take care and protect my family. I'm vaccinated. Most of my friends have been vaccinated. Most of the folks I'm talking to, but just want to be careful. But a lot of people aren't worried about it, and more power to them. But you got to do what you got to do for you and yourself. So don't be afraid to take precautions and look out for what's important in your mind. So it's a little surreal, but the programs have been great. The attendance does seem to be a little light compared to previous years, but I'm sorry, compared to the size that they planned for the event and so on. It's also being offered virtually, and a couple of times I've had to be in my hotel room or away from the conference center, but I've been able to watch it on my cell phone or watch one of the presentations I was interested on my iPad or my computer, and it's been really cool to be able to do that. So things are changing in the way we do things, and I find that to be pretty exciting. There's no substitute, though, for being in person, face to face, bumping elbows with people, and especially connecting with friends as well as new people. Nothing substitutes for the personal interaction. Some of the things I have attended were around the monetization information, and I'll be synthesizing and distilling some of that information down for folks before too long. I'll be doing that inside my group at Legit Podcast Pro, and I'll make a little plug. If you are a podcaster looking to take things to the next level, whether you intend to make money from your show or you just want to do a better job of podcasting, Legit Podcast Pro is the place to do it. Come on over to legitpodcastpro.com and join up and join the Facebook group for Legit Podcast Pro and become a member. And it's free. It's free. It's just something I'm doing because I care about this medium and I care about the people in this medium. So come and check it out. So want to jump into some questions and issues that have come up. The first off is I've talked to a bunch of people this week who are in the audio drama space, and a couple of them said, "Oh, I use your podcast release for my cast on the show," and I think, well, that's wonderful that they're using the podcast release, but it's not the right form. It's not the right document. I want to help you keep the drama on microphone and on the recordings of your show and not in your life other than that, because let's face it, when you're making media, there are risks and challenges. So let's talk about some of the legal issues that come up for audio drama podcasters. A little different from someone who's just doing an interview show or just a talk to the microphone format. When you're presenting drama, there's an underlying rights issue. Where did the story that you're presenting come from? right? So if you're basing it on a story, you better have the rights to adapt that story. I actually had a call from a fella who had decided he's already actually through season one of his show, which is in his words, an adaptation of a very famous science fiction novel series. And as we talked about it, it became clear that he's retelling the same story contained in this famous book series, but in his own, from his own perspective or his own point of view. And we had to have the hard conversation about, did you get the rights to that material from the estate of the author of that book series? And when the answer was no, I sort of said, well, look, he called me. He wanted to know, what do I have to do? He hadn't thought about this issue. So my advice was, oh, we've got to look into getting those rights and maybe apologize and offer to take it down, but then ask, how can I get your blessing to do this going forward? Unfortunately, we discovered in searching a little bit that particular series, a book series, is already been spoken for in the space of a television series, a streaming television series, and so it's very unlikely that the authors of the author's estate will be able to grant those rights. So, don't quite know what he's decided to do yet, but unfortunately, the risk of a lawsuit is, it's there. Actually, we'll talk about the risk of a lawsuit because there is that sort of a notion that, well, we're too small to sue. And I will just address that by saying, look, nobody's too small to sue. They may be too small to fight. They may not be worth suing in the sense of the ability to recover money from them. But if you own rights to intellectual property, you have a duty to that property and to yourself to defend it, to police the uses of it. And if you don't sue, you eventually could lose the rights to protect that work. So unfortunately, they may have to sue in order to preserve those rights. And that lawsuit is, it might be over very quickly, but it ain't going to be no fun. Let's put it that way. So, underlying rights contract. Now, somebody is writing the script of that adaptation that you're doing, that audio drama. Now, if that's you, the host and owner of the show, you may not need to worry about anything. If you're doing things the way I often recommend, inside an LLC or a corporation, that LLC or corporation should have an employment agreement with you, the author, the creator of that adaptation. If you're hiring writers, then you need to have contracts with those writers. They need to be hired. It doesn't have to be an employment relationship. It can be a work made for hire independent contractor arrangement. California being a possible exception for that, but generally a work made for hire contract that transfers ownership of the scripts to the podcast producer would be sufficient. Writers agreements, and that's the kind of thing that needs to be done in writing, of course. Everybody on your crew needs to sign an agreement. If you have a sound effects technician or an editor or whatever, that person needs to sign off. If you have a recording engineer, if you hire a recording studio, you better have a written contract that documents the nature of that relationship and the fact that what you create is what you own. I'm sorry, what's created by those others belongs to you, the essentially the employer, the contracting producer. So crew, studios, facilities, and of course the talent. Now, if you're using professional acting talent, there's a good chance that they're members of the Screen Actors Guild. Even though we're not talking about screen when it's an audio podcast, audio drama, the Screen Actors Guild, SAG-AFTRA, which is SAG is the Screen Actors Guild, AFTRA is the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. That pretty much covers anybody who performs these kinds of things on camera or on microphone. And SAG and AFTRA merged a few years ago. That's why it's called SAG-AFTRA now. That is the union of professional actors. If you're using professional acting talent, you're going to need to comply with the union's new media agreement. And that means becoming signatory with the union, signing the collective bargaining agreement, and then abiding by its terms. This episode is too short to get into the details of what those terms involve, but they deal with, obviously, compensation and credit and work hours and work environment and safety and those kinds of things. It's good to pay attention to that. But it's often very costly and not very cost efficient or cost effective for independent podcast producers to use professional talent. So that's something to think about. Non-union talent agreements also do need to exist, and it doesn't have to be a particularly complicated agreement, but you need to cover the basic terms of, who are the parties, what's the nature of the relationship, what is the role this person is being hired to perform, when will they be expected to do the various things, where will they need to go, do they have to travel, is somebody going to pay for their travel and accommodations, and their transportation, those kinds of things, and any other conditions of the employment, and of course their compensation. How much are they going to be paid and when? It is possible to be flexible with those terms, so you have a negotiation ahead when you do that. So that's it. There's sort of 4 or 5 categories of deals that you need to deal with when you're doing audio drama. It's very much like producing a movie or a television program, although there are some variations in how things are done. You have the underlying rights in the story. If it's not an original story, someone needs to be paid for doing the adaptation. If you're hiring writers, you need a contract between the company or the producer and the writers. If you're the sole cook and chief cook and bottle washer, then you may not need a contract between yourself and yourself. But if you're doing things with a company, then the company should definitely have the right to your services. Even if you're the owner of the company, you want to have an employment agreement that documents this stuff and provides for your compensation, because let's say you decide to sell the show or sell the company to somebody, you still want to get paid for the work you did. That might include fees, it might include royalties or some other form of back-end compensation or deferred compensation, those kinds of things. So think hard about that. If you're doing audio drama, please think about these kinds of issues and reach out and get some help. I'm happy to do that. I am not just a podcast lawyer. I've been practicing in the field of entertainment law, which is film and television and radio and music and theater and those kinds of things, for a very long time now, and I can help you with that. So that's that. Once again, let me say, by the way, if you're doing any of these things, please consider joining Legit Podcast Pro, my private, free Facebook group for folks that are interested in taking things to the next level in terms of the quality and professionalism of what they're doing. That means getting things legit, getting things right, getting things in writing. Your success of your show may in fact depend on it. So consider joining. Go to legitpodcastpro.com or join the Facebook group Legit Podcast Pro here on Facebook. What else? Next question for our production here today, our episode, deals with, well, I'll read you the story. I have a book series that I've been working on. So in this case, this person is writing about creating a book series, but the same would go for creating a podcast series. I've been working on this for a year now, more or less, and I've almost finished writing it, the whole thing. This whole year, I've had a particular title already set in stone for my book. But as I grew closer to finishing, I realized that there's a popular game series by the same title. And while the two media are different and have absolutely nothing to do with each other, I find myself wondering if I'll be sued into oblivion if I continue forward with this title. They have completely different plots, settings, characters, and even time periods. So what are your thoughts? Well, let me tell you, friend, I'm not going to, at your request, I'm withholding your contact and your name and your information, and I didn't reveal the title of the property. But yeah, I think it's a big concern. Even though that video game may not be in the same class of goods or services as your book series would be, the likelihood of confusion is significant, especially because there are video game series that have been adapted and novelized and turned into book series as well. The same characters, the same universe, and so on, turned into book series. Now, you say you're talking about a different universe, different characters, different scenarios. It's just the title in common. But you can understand how someone who sees that book on the shelf or on a web page might conclude, oh, it's a book series based on that game. So it's a fairly likely transition between one segment of market into another. And so I counsel caution. Don't say the title is set in stone unless you are prepared to do one of two things. One is to approach the creators of the original game and ask them for their blessing, permission, license to use the title, and be prepared to pay something for that, and also be prepared for the possibility that they say no. So that's one option. And the other is be prepared to be sued and to defend a lawsuit. And there may be valid defenses, what you said about the differences being more significant than the similarity of the title. That may very well be persuasive in court. But unfortunately, there is no way to know until it's all done, until the lawsuit is over. So be prepared to either ask for and buy the rights or defend yourself in court. That's really what it comes down to there. So will you be sued into oblivion? No telling. Some owners wouldn't worry about it, wouldn't care, and some would. So it really just sort of depends. Based on the game that you're telling me about, I think that's published by one of the relatively large video game publishers, and it seems to me that they will be taking that approach that I said earlier. Nobody's too small to sue because they have to protect their intellectual property at any cost, really. So that's that. It's an underlying rights deal. Likewise, if you were actually doing a podcast based on a video game series of characters, same thing. Different class of goods and services, right? Video games fall in a different class from books, and also a different class from podcasts. Although there is a common class 9 of trademarks, deals with downloadable and recorded media and material, and that could include either a podcast episode or a video game. So aren't those the fun kinds of things that we lawyers get to think about when we start looking at these things? If you have any of these kinds of issues, please join the group, Legit Podcast Pro. That's the third time I'm mentioning it today. But also just reach out to me. I love to answer these questions. It's what I'm here for. I want to help you, creative people in the podcasting and other communities, to get the most value and have the most satisfying experience of sharing your message, getting the word out, and influencing the world with your content. So that's what I'm here to do, is to help you accomplish that. That's why I do these videos. I want to educate folks. I want everybody to understand what it is they have to do. So that is it for today. I don't see any questions in the comment area today, so I think I'm just going to call it a day. I'm 2 hours ahead, so it's 6:17 p.m. now in Nashville, and that means it's dinner time, and I'm hungry. So thanks again for being here. Tune in again tomorrow. I'll try to do another podcast movement diary entry and share with you a little bit more about what I've learned. And stay tuned in the next couple of weeks, and I'll be bringing out more of those kinds of thoughts. And that's it. From Nashville, Tennessee today, I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, signing off. I'll see you again really, really soon. Bye.